The sky above Earth was a burning ruin. The once proud skyline of New York, now little more than skeletal remains, stood in eerie silence beneath the Dominion's warships. Smoke coiled through the air like spectral fingers, and the scent of ash and ozone was thick enough to taste. Captain Logan Carter crouched in the rubble of a collapsed building, his pulse steady despite the chaos around him. He adjusted his grip on his rifle, the matte black weapon slick with dirt and sweat. Beside him, his last surviving SEALs, Harris, O'Connell, and Vega, waited in grim silence. "They've got full air superiority now," Harris murmured, watching the alien gunships circle above. "We won't get another shot at this." Logan exhaled through his nose, his mind already filtering through their dwindling options. The Galactic Dominion had come with an overwhelming force, descending upon Earth in a storm of energy blasts and kinetic bombardments. Entire cities had been leveled in days, their populations either incinerated or rounded up like livestock. Resistance efforts had been valiant, but ultimately futile. Humanity had fought tooth and nail, but the Dominion's technological supremacy was absolute. Now, only scattered remnants of fighters remained, outgunned, outnumbered, and hunted. "We hit their command outpost. We buy time," Logan said. His voice was rough, sandpaper against steel. "They think we're broken. Let's remind them why they should be afraid of humans." O'Connell smirked, a grim kind of amusement flickering behind his weary eyes. "Hell yeah, Captain." The team moved through the ruins, their training ingrained into muscle memory. The Dominion's ground troops, a brutal race of reptilian bipeds with obsidian armor and energy rifles, patrolled what remained of Manhattan. Their heavy footsteps echoed in the distance, accompanied by the guttural sounds of their alien dialect. The SEALs remained in the shadows, slipping between collapsed structures and burned-out vehicles. Every movement was calculated, every breath controlled. Vega signaled a halt. He pointed toward an enemy outpost constructed from repurposed human infrastructure, its exterior reinforced with the Dominion's strange, chitinous plating. Guards manned the perimeter, their reptilian eyes scanning the ruins. A Dominion officer, taller than the others, barked orders in a series of hisses and clicks. "Targets marked," Vega whispered. Logan studied the layout. He could see the power conduits snaking up the side of the structure, exposed just enough to be vulnerable. A well-placed charge could black out their local defenses. He tapped his comm, Harris. "Set the explosives." "We'll cover." Harris nodded and disappeared into the wreckage, moving with the fluid grace of a veteran operative. The remaining SEALs positioned themselves, rifles aimed at the guards below. Logan's breathing slowed, his heartbeat steady. Years of experience had taught him patience. The Dominion thought they had won, but they had underestimated the resilience of the human spirit. The charge detonated in a controlled blast, sending a ripple of blue energy arcing through the outpost defenses. The guards reacted instantly, weapons raised, but Logan was faster. His rifle spat fire, rounds punching through alien armor with brutal efficiency. Vega and O'Connell followed suit, cutting down the disoriented enemy before they could regroup. Within seconds, the outpost was in chaos. Logan advanced, his boots crunching over shattered debris. He reached the central terminal, its interface a mess of glowing alien script. He inserted a data spike, stolen from a previous raid, into the system, letting Harris work his magic. "Give me 30 seconds, Harris muttered, fingers flying over his portable console. They didn't have 30 seconds. Reinforcements were already inbound, their guttural roars echoing through the ruins. Logan turned, raising his rifle just as the first wave appeared. The fight became brutal, close-quarters combat against an enemy that towered over them in both size and strength. Logan drove his combat knife into a Dominion soldier's throat, twisting the blade as hot alien blood sprayed across his visor. "Done!" Harris shouted. "Move!" Logan barked. The team fell back, ducking through collapsed structures as enemy fire rained down behind them. Their mission had been simple: gather intelligence, disrupt Dominion operations, and remind the enemy that humanity would not be erased so easily. They had succeeded, but survival was another matter. A Dominion gunship swooped overhead, its weapons charging with a high-pitched whine. Logan's gut tightened. They wouldn't outrun this. His mind raced through possibilities, calculating risks, but before he could act, a blinding explosion erupted from the sky. The gunship shuddered, its hull splitting apart as it spiraled downward in a fiery wreck. A second later, a familiar voice crackled over the comms. "Need a lift, Captain." Relief mixed with exhaustion as Logan recognized the voice of Commander Rourke, one of the last remaining human pilots. Above them, a stolen Dominion dropship hovered, its bay doors open. Logan didn't hesitate. "Go, go, go!" he ordered. The SEALs sprinted, leaping onto the waiting ramp as plasma fire scorched the ground behind them. The doors sealed shut, and the dropship rocketed into the sky. Logan collapsed against the wall, catching his breath as the battered earth shrank beneath them. For a moment, silence filled the cabin. Then Rourke turned from the cockpit, his expression grim. "We're not the only ones left, but we're damn close." Logan nodded. He already knew the truth. Earth had fallen. The war, however, was far from over. The Dominion ship drifted through the void, its sleek, chitinous hull reflecting the distant light of a dying Earth. Deep within its cold, sterile corridors, Logan Carter adjusted the fit of his stolen armor, feeling the weight of the mission pressing down on him. The SEALs had fought impossible odds before, but this was something else. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to turn the tide. Harris knelt beside the access terminal, his fingers dancing over the Dominion interface. The stolen data spike had given them limited control over the ship systems, but the language barrier made every action a calculated risk. His brow furrowed in concentration. "We've got maybe an hour before they realize we're not just another patrol ship. After that, every Dominion warship in the sector is going to be on us." Logan nodded, absorbing the information like he had 100 times before. Every mission was about assessing risk and executing with precision. He glanced at Vega and O'Connell, their faces hardened by exhaustion, but still carrying the fire that had kept them alive. They weren't done yet. "Targets?" O'Connell asked, checking the charge on his rifle. Logan activated the holographic display on his forearm, a crude but functional map of the Dominion's Central Command outpost on Pharos 9. It was a fortified structure built into the rocky terrain of the moon, a nerve center for Dominion fleet operations. Crippling it wouldn't win the war, but it would buy humanity time. It would remind the enemy that Earth's warriors weren't beaten yet. "We infiltrate the outpost under the guise of a routine docking inspection," Logan said, keeping his voice measured. "Harris will deploy a viral payload into their system, corrupt their targeting protocols, and force a temporary blackout in their communications network. That'll blind their fleet long enough for us to hit the command hub. Once we're inside, we take out their leadership, plant explosives, and vanish before they know what hit them." Vega smirked. Classic misdirection. Logan's lips twitched in the closest thing he had to a smile. Rule number 1. The ship's artificial lighting dimmed as they neared the outpost. The Dominion security scan swept over them, but the stolen clearance codes held. The docking clamps locked into place with a mechanical hiss, and the boarding ramp lowered. Logan took one last breath, then led his team into the belly of the beast. The Dominion officers barely glanced at them. The stolen armor did its job, rendering them just another group of faceless soldiers among the ranks. The air smelled metallic, laced with the acrid scent of Dominion technology and the faint, musky odor of the reptilian warriors. Logan kept his posture rigid, walking with the same clipped precision as the soldiers around them. Any sign of hesitation would be fatal. They moved through the corridors in a tight formation, each step calculated. Harris veered off first, his role clear, reached the central server hub, and deployed the virus. Vega and O'Connell followed Logan toward the command center, their weapons concealed but ready. The Dominion had never faced an enemy like them before. That was their greatest advantage, A Dominion officer turned the corner, his reptilian eyes narrowing in suspicion. Logan felt the shift in the air before the alien even spoke. The moment stretched, tension coiling like a spring. Then Logan moved. In a blur of motion, he slammed the butt of his rifle into the officer's throat, cutting off any chance of an alarm. Vega caught the body before it hit the ground, dragging it into the shadows. No words were exchanged. There was no time. The command center loomed ahead, its doors sealed with a biometric lock. O'Connell stepped forward, producing a small but effective breaching charge. The explosion was minimal, more a directed burst than a full detonation, but it did the job. The doors hissed open, and the SEALs stormed inside. The Dominion officers barely had time to react. Logan's rifle snapped up, cutting down the first with a controlled burst. Vega and O'Connell moved in tandem, precise and efficient. The room erupted into chaos, but the SEALs were faster, deadlier. Harris's voice crackled over the comms. "Virus is live. You've got 5 minutes before their systems start cannibalizing themselves." Logan scanned the room, his gaze locking onto the central terminal. He reached it in 3 strides, inserting the secondary data spike. "Plant the charges," he ordered, his voice steady. O'Connell worked quickly, setting the explosives along the structural weak points. They needed to be in and out before the Dominion could regroup. The console in front of Logan flickered, and an unfamiliar voice, deep and guttural, came through the ship's internal speakers. "You are not one of us." Logan didn't flinch. He turned toward the main display screen, where a Dominion commander stared back at him, his golden eyes burning with cold calculation. "You should not be here, human." Logan tilted his head, his grip tightening around his rifle. "Neither should you." The charges detonated. The command center shuddered as fire and debris tore through the structure. Logan didn't wait to see the aftermath. He turned and ran, his team right behind him. By the time they reached the docking bay, alarms were screaming through the outpost. Dominion soldiers scrambled, but their systems were failing, their defenses collapsing in real time. The virus was doing its job. The stolen ship was still docked, its engines already primed for departure. Logan sprinted up the ramp, slamming his fist against the controls. The docking clamps released, and the ship lurched free just as the first explosions rippled through the outpost. Vega let out a breathless chuckle. That went well. Logan didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the viewport, watching as Pharos 9 burned. It was a victory, but only a small one. The real fight was still ahead. The Dominion dreadnought loomed ahead, a monolith of obsidian plating and pulsating energy, veins stretching across its massive hull. It was less a warship and more a floating fortress, a city among the stars where the Dominion's high command orchestrated their war against humanity. Logan Carter watched from the cockpit of the stolen Dominion transport, his grip firm on the armrest as the vessel slid through the dreadnought's docking array, unnoticed among the returning patrols. The stolen clearance codes had held, but once they were inside, deception wouldn't save them. This mission would be fought in blood and fire. Vega adjusted his stolen armor, the alien plating fitting awkwardly over his frame. "I still don't like this," he muttered. "Sneaking around in their own damn ship is one thing, but walking into the heart of their empire." O'Connell checked his rifle, his expression unreadable. "Would you rather charge the front gate?" Logan didn't entertain the conversation. He kept his focus ahead as the transport settled onto the docking platform. The ship's exterior cameras showed Dominion soldiers moving in precise formations, their towering forms gleaming under the artificial lights. This was the core of their military might, the best-trained, most disciplined warriors in the Dominion. If the SEALs were discovered, there would be no escape. The hatch hissed open. Logan took the first step, his posture mimicking the rigid stance of the Dominion officers he had studied. Beside him, Harris moved with practiced ease, his face unreadable beneath the darkened visor of his stolen helmet. O'Connell and Vega followed, weapons concealed beneath their armor. They moved through the corridors in silence, their path mapped through stolen schematics. Every Dominion ship had a primary command nexus, a central hub where the fleet's movements were coordinated. Crippling, it would send ripples through the entire war effort. Their mission was twofold: plant explosives in key structural weak points and access the Dominion's encrypted fleet transmissions. The corridors pulsed with a dim, bioluminescent glow, casting shifting shadows along the curved walls. Dominion officers strode past without sparing them a second glance, their clawed feet clicking against the metallic flooring. The language of their hissing speech filled the air, unreadable but layered with the authority of a race that believed itself untouchable. Harris tapped the control panel, sending a coded signal to their hidden ship. "We've got access to the lower decks," he murmured. "Security checkpoints ahead. We'll need to split." Logan considered their options. The Dominion's network core was below them, buried deep within the dreadnought's armored hull. Accessing it required bypassing multiple security layers, each more deadly than the last. "Vega, O'Connell, get to the reactor conduits and set the charges," Logan ordered. "Harris and I will handle the data retrieval." There was no argument. The team split, each step precise, each movement calculated. Logan and Harris descended into the lower decks, the air growing colder as they neared the ship's core. Unlike the rigid military formations above, this level was eerily silent, the Dominion's automated systems handling most operations. The mainframe chamber lay ahead, its entrance guarded by two towering Dominion warriors, their energy rifles glowing faintly in the dim light. Logan didn't break stride. He moved with the confidence of someone who belonged, his gaze fixed forward. The guards barely reacted until Logan struck. His knife was in his hand before the first alien could draw his weapon. The blade sank deep, severing flesh and muscle. The second Dominion warrior let out a strangled hiss, raising his rifle, but Harris was already moving. A silenced shot punched through the alien's skull, sending its massive form crumpling to the ground. Logan wiped his blade clean, then motioned toward the console. "We're in." Harris worked fast, his fingers moving across the Dominion interface with an efficiency that came from years of decoding enemy systems. The holographic display flickered, streams of alien script cascading across the screen. "Got something?" Harris muttered. His eyes narrowed. "They're moving their fleet. Not just a few ships, everything. They're regrouping at Sector Prime. If they're consolidating forces, it means one of two things. They think we're a real threat, or they're about to launch something bigger than we've seen before." Logan didn't hesitate. "Download everything. We'll analyze later." Alarms blared. The sound was deep, resonant, carrying across the dreadnought with a sense of finality. Logan's jaw tightened. They had minutes at best before the entire ship locked down. Harris yanked the data spike from the console. "We're done here." They moved fast, retracing their steps through the dim corridors. Vega's voice crackled through the comms. "Charges are set. We're heading back." Logan rounded the final corner, then froze. Dominion enforcers stood ahead, blocking the path to their extraction point. These weren't standard soldiers. Their armor was reinforced, their weapons primed. At their center stood a figure taller than the rest, his golden eyes gleaming with cold amusement. "Humans," the Dominion commander said, his voice carrying a faint trace of admiration. "I should have expected this." Logan didn't answer. Words were meaningless now. The Dominion moved first. Energy bolts tore through the corridor, searing past as Logan and Harris dove for cover. The air filled with the scent of burning metal and ozone. Logan returned fire, his rifle spinning controlled bursts, but the Dominion's armor held. They needed an exit, and they needed it now. A detonation rocked the ship, the force of the explosion shaking the walls. Vega and O'Connell had triggered the first charge. The Dominion warriors hesitated, just enough. Logan took the opening. He surged forward, knife flashing as he closed the distance. The commander was fast, but Logan was faster. The blade found its mark, slipping between the alien's armored plates, severing something vital. The Dominion's golden eyes widened in surprise before the life bled from them. Harris fired at the remaining enforcers, dropping one before the rest fell back, momentarily disoriented. "Move!" Logan barked. They sprinted toward the docking bay, the ship shuddering around them. Dominion ships outside were already scrambling, their formations breaking as confusion rippled through their ranks. The dreadnought was compromised, its systems failing. Their stolen vessel awaited them, its engines primed. The SEALs leapt aboard, the ramp ceiling shut as the ship rocketed free of the docking clamps. Explosions tore through the dreadnought behind them, fire and debris consuming the vessel from within. Vega exhaled, watching the destruction unfold. "That's going to leave a mark." Logan didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the stolen data spike in Harris's hand. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. The war had led to this moment. Logan Carter stood at the heart of the last battlefield, his boots digging into the cold steel of the orbital station's command deck. The massive viewport ahead showed Earth below, a fragile blue sphere hanging in the void, its surface marred by the scars of invasion. The Dominion's fleet surrounded it, an armada of blackened warships poised to deliver the final blow. If they succeeded, humanity would cease to exist. Behind him, Vega, O'Connell, and Harris took their positions, their weapons primed. They had fought through waves of Dominion soldiers to get here, carving a path of destruction through the station's defenses. Now, only one obstacle remained: the Dominion Supreme Commander, Varric. The alien warlord stood at the center of the room, his massive frame draped in ceremonial battle armor, its dark plates etched with the history of 1,000 conquests. His golden eyes burned with disdain as he regarded the humans before him. Around him, Dominion elites formed a protective perimeter, their weapons humming with barely restrained energy. "You have fought well," Varric said, his voice carrying the weight of a conqueror who had never known defeat. "But this is the end. You cannot stop what has already begun." Logan didn't blink. "That's what they all say." With a flick of his wrist, Varric signaled his warriors forward. The room exploded into chaos. Logan moved first, diving behind a console as energy blasts scorched the air where he had stood. Vega and O'Connell returned fire, their shots precise, disciplined, SEAL tactics honed to perfection. Harris ducked low, working his way toward the station's control systems. The mission wasn't just about survival. It was about turning the Dominion's own weapons against them. A Dominion warrior lunged, its blade slicing through the air toward Logan's head. He twisted, narrowly avoiding the strike, then drove his combat knife into the alien's throat. The warrior gurgled once before collapsing. No time to hesitate. Logan was already moving, his rifle raised, his trigger finger steady. Varric remained still, watching as his soldiers fell. He didn't flinch when Logan shot down 2 more Dominion elites, didn't waver as Vega drove his knife into another's chest. The warlord merely observed, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Then he moved. Logan barely had time to react before Varric was upon him. The Dominion commander was impossibly fast, closing the distance in a blur of motion. Logan raised his rifle, but Varric swatted it aside, the weapon skidding across the floor. A massive hand wrapped around Logan's throat, lifting him off the ground with terrifying ease. "You fight like a cornered animal," Varric mused, his grip tightening. "Desperate. Weak." Logan struggled, his vision darkening at the edges. He could hear Vega and O'Connell shouting, could hear the distant whine of Harris working furiously at the control panel. They needed more time. He had to buy it. He forced a smirk. "You forgot rule number 1. Varric's brow furrowed in confusion. That was all Logan needed. With his free hand, he pulled the grenade from his vest, yanked the pin with his teeth, and shoved it against the warlord's exposed ribs. The explosion wasn't large, but it was enough. The force sent both of them flying, Logan crashing hard against the console, while Varric was thrown backward, his armor cracked, blackened, and smoking. Logan coughed, forcing himself to his feet. Blood trickled down his forehead, but he ignored it. Varric Thal was struggling, his once imposing form now weakened, his breath ragged. Harris's voice cut through the chaos. Got it. I've overridden their fleet's targeting systems. Logan staggered forward, gripping his pistol. Varric Thal's golden eyes locked onto him, filled not with fear, but with defiance. You think this will change anything? The warlord rasped. Logan pressed the barrel against Varric Thal's skull. Yeah, he said, pulling the trigger. The warlord's body hit the floor. Harris worked furiously at the console, his fingers flying over the controls. Their fleet's weapons are turning on themselves. They won't even realize what's happening until it's too late. Outside, the Dominion armada faltered. Battleships fired upon one another, their ranks collapsing into confusion. Earth's defenses, once on the brink of destruction, rallied. Humanity wasn't just surviving. It was winning. Logan exhaled, staring at the battlefield beyond. The war wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, it wasn't lost. The silence felt heavier than the battle had. Logan Carter stood at the edge of the ruined command deck, staring through the fractured viewport as the Dominion fleet collapsed upon itself. The once unbreakable armada had become a funeral pyre, its warships tearing each other apart in confusion and chaos. Wreckage drifted like dying embers across the void, flickering against the backdrop of Earth's wounded surface. Fires still burned in the atmosphere, but they were humanity's fires now. Signals of defiance rather than destruction. Behind him, Harris slumped against the console, sweat glistening on his brow as he monitored the failing Dominion systems. We did it, he muttered, barely believing the words. Their fleet's done. Their command structure is shattered. Vega exhaled sharply, gripping his rifle with white-knuckled hands. Not all of them. He gestured toward the far end of the chamber, where Dominion soldiers still stood, frozen in place. Without their supreme commander, without clear orders, they hesitated. For the first time, the Dominion was leaderless. Logan turned to face them. These warriors had razed entire cities, slaughtered millions without remorse. And yet, in this moment, they weren't monsters. They were soldiers like him, soldiers who had lost. O'Connell stepped forward, rifle raised. We finishing this or what? One of the Dominion officers, a scarred brute with deep-set amber eyes, met Logan's gaze. There was no hatred there, no rage, only the grim understanding of a warrior who knew the battle was over. He lowered his weapon. One by one, the others followed. Logan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It's over, he said. For the first time in years, those words didn't feel like a lie. The SEALs moved quickly, securing the surviving Dominion personnel and transmitting the surrender signal to Earth's remaining forces. It spread like wildfire. Across the planet, Dominion troops began laying down their arms. Without their warlords, without their fleet, the Empire's grip shattered. An hour later, Logan stood aboard the bridge of a captured Dominion cruiser, watching as humanity's forces reclaimed their skies. The resistance had survived, beaten, bloodied, but unbroken. Refugee ships emerged from hiding, their battered hulls limping into view as the first wave of liberated cities sent desperate signals of relief. Earth was still standing. A voice crackled over the comms. To all remaining human forces, this is Colonel Everett of the United Earth Defense. If you're hearing this, you are no longer alone. We are taking back our world. Vega let out a tired chuckle. About damn time. Logan didn't respond. He was watching something else. The Dominion fleet's final remnants, those who hadn't surrendered, retreating beyond the solar system. The Empire wasn't completely gone. They would return one day. But humanity would be ready. O'Connell stepped beside him. So what now? Logan exhaled, staring at the vast expanse beyond. There was no roadmap for what came next. They had spent so long fighting, surviving, that victory itself felt unfamiliar. We rebuild, he said finally. We remind the galaxy who we are, Harris smirked, and if they forget, Logan allowed himself a rare smile. Then we teach them rule number 1. Earth was theirs again. Humanity had risen, and they weren't going anywhere.